I'm sitting back against the chair, one hand holding a warm cup of tea, the other flipping through an old magazine I bought from the thrift shop on the corner. The early November air seeps through every crack of my tiny apartment on the outskirts of Minneapolis. Outside the window, the leaden gray sky looks like it's trying to press snow onto the ground but is strangely silent. The phone rings suddenly, breaking the delicate quiet. I glance at the screen. Dad! My breath catches for a second. I hit the speaker button, not allowing myself to hope for anything good. Emily, you don't need to come home for Thanksgiving this year, his voice says, light, as if he were talking about picking up more toilet paper. For a second, I think I misheard. I'm sorry, what? We just think it's better if you stayed put, he continues without pause, like he had rehearsed it in his head. To keep things peaceful. Mandy's been a bit on edge lately, you know? I set the teacup down on the table. The sound of ceramic hitting wood is sharp and dry. Mandy. Again. Mandy, my sister. The princess who never had to be responsible for anything. Anytime there's a problem, the whole family holds their breath just so she can feel comfortable. So, what you're saying is I'm not invited just because Mandy gets tense? I enunciate each word, trying to stay calm, though my throat feels tight. My dad sighs, that signature sigh of his that means don't make this a big deal. It's just one day, Emily. You'll be fine. I shoot up from the chair, the wood creaking underneath in protest. Just one day? I repeat, my voice now as cold as the frost on the porch. You say that after I've sent over $4,800 to the house since January, just to keep the furnace running through winter? Silence on the other end. Just the faint hum of the phone line, stretching out the distance between me and him. Don't bring money into this, he finally says, a little flustered. You offered to help. I let out a dry, hollow laugh that echoes in the empty room. Offered? In January when the heating bill spiked and you called at midnight saying the house was freezing, who paid it immediately? Me. In March when Mom cried because the furnace was clanking, who called the repairman? Me again. And in September when Mandy blew through most of her savings on her podcast plan, who paid for the fall heating oil? Still me. He doesn't argue, just goes back to the same tired line. Family is family, Emily. But this time, Mandy really needs calm. She's been through a lot. I stare out through the fogged-up window. Snow is beginning to fall, small flakes quietly covering the walkway. I've been through a lot too, but I was never given that kind of priority. He tries to keep his voice even, but I can hear the impatience creeping in. Don't make this awkward. It's not personal. I take a deep breath, fingers gripping the edge of the table. Then don't expect another dime from me this winter. If I'm not considered part of the family, don't treat me like an A. I hang up before he can respond, the screen going black like my eyes right now. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Silent. Freezing, but not quieter than the room I'm standing in. I sink onto the edge of the bed, hands clasped together, my thoughts tangled like the old cords in the kitchen drawer. That short phone call replays in my mind like a broken tape. They really did it. Excluded me from Thanksgiving, as casually as canceling a dentist appointment. I look up at the small photo on the shelf. Me and my parents at Thanksgiving in 2019. I had just started my first job at the shipping company, low pay, long shifts, but I still caught a bus home just to sit at the table, eat Mom's roast chicken, and listen to Dad rant about his team losing. That warmth now feels like an old, dusty memory. I get up, walk to the desk, and open my laptop. Wind howls outside, slipping through the old window frame, sharp and bitter. I open the utility payment account, the one I set up for them last winter after Mom sobbed on the phone, saying it was too cold and they couldn't afford heating oil. I was the one who called the oil company every month. I was the one who paid every bill, every dollar. Over $2,400 last year and $4,800 this year, just for heating. I did it not because anyone asked, but because I thought it was the right thing to do. I used to believe helping family through hard times came without conditions. Until I became the extra piece. I pull up the Excel file where I quietly logged every transfer. The last entry reads, 10 months ago, $400. Sent ahead of the cold so they wouldn't worry. I wonder, do they even remember? I watched Mandy, my sister, burn through nearly $16,000 of my parents' savings in 4 months. Her artisanal candle business sounded artsy, until she ordered over 1,000 candles from a mass production plant in Texas, slapped on a handmade label, and thought she could sell them at triple the price. No one bought them, the inventory piled up in the garage, and my parents, instead of scolding or holding her accountable, just shook their heads and said, "She's young. Everyone makes mistakes." I didn't say a word, just quietly sent more money to help them through winter. Meanwhile, Mandy kept posting pictures on Instagram. $7 lattes at vintage cafes, brunches with friends in the latest Zara coat. Every time I scrolled past one, my hand would drift to my back, still sore from a 10-hour loading shift. I almost texted to ask why, but then I thought, maybe it's something I'll never truly understand or accept. I returned to the screen, the cursor blinking over the cancel service button. Just one click and the system will stop automatic payments starting next month. I sit quietly for a long while, not because I'm unsure, but because I'm letting myself remember what it felt like to matter to them. And then I click. A notification pops up. Service will end on November 2nd, 4 weeks before Thanksgiving. I close the laptop and walk to the window. Snow is falling now, each flake as weightless as my father's words on the phone. Except snow, when it falls long enough, can freeze a whole house. They'll notice, but not right away. Mandy will keep believing the world revolves around her. Mom will try to ignore it until her fingers go numb while making dinner. And Dad? He'll get angry, like always. But he won't be able to deny that he's the one who told me to stay put. Part of me feels hollow, like I just let go of something important. But another part, the one that woke up the third time I had to choose between buying a new coat or sending money home, feels lighter. For the first time in a long time, I'm standing up for myself. And I know this winter will be long, but at least I'm no longer the one shivering because of someone else's decision. I started waking up earlier, not because my job changed, but because sleep hasn't felt peaceful since that call. In the days after canceling my parents' heating service, I carried a constant tension, like walking a tightrope. Part relief, part doubt. But every morning, when I get out of bed and my feet touch the cold floor of this small but peaceful apartment, I remember why I did it. On November 2nd, the system officially sent confirmation. The heating oil service for the house at 422 Elm Street had been canceled. I read that message while sipping coffee in the kitchen, the little space heater humming steadily by my feet. A quiet kind of comfort I'd bought for myself, piece by piece, through every extra shift. That day, the snow fell unusually thick. Minneapolis was already cold, but this year winter seemed to arrive a few weeks early. I thought about my parents' 2-story house, the house I grew up in, with its old shingles and thin glass windows, where the cold could creep in after just one night without heat. I didn't feel happy picturing them bundled up in winter coats, but I didn't feel guilty either. It was time they understood that kindness isn't an obligation, especially when it's treated like a given. 4 days later, the first message came from Mom. "Emily, the heating system seems to be acting up. Can you check it for me?" I stared at the message, then set my phone down. I didn't reply. That evening, I got a text from Mandy, just one line. So childish. No greeting, no question, just judgment, as always. She probably thought I'd react, scramble to explain, or maybe even apologize. But I simply switched my phone to silent. On the 7th day, Dad called. I let it ring until it stopped on its own. 3 minutes later, a voicemail popped up. Emily, I don't know what's going on. The house is down to 58 degrees. If you know anything, call me. His voice was hoarse and sharp, a mix of anger and concern. I didn't listen to the voicemail. Instead, I went to the bookstore on Lake Street, bought a new novel, and sat for hours at the cafe next door, where the heater roared and the smell of warm cinnamon waffles filled the air. I let myself enjoy something I had always postponed. Time for myself. On the 10th day, I got a call from an unknown number. It was the heating oil provider. Hi, is this Miss Emily? Are you planning to renew service for the house at 422 Elm Street? We haven't heard back from the homeowners, and the previous contract was under your name. I answered clearly, no, the contract was canceled and will not be renewed. I'm no longer responsible for that house. I see, the rep said, hesitating slightly. So, just to confirm, you're not intending to continue payments? I looked out the window, where slow snowflakes blanketed the street. That's correct. On November 14th, the messages started coming in rapid succession. Mom, Emily, it's only 50 degrees in the house. Your dad refuses to wear a heavy coat and Mandy's been coughing all day. Can you please call me? Dad, this isn't about money anymore. This is family. Mandy, this time more bitter. Fine. Just pretend you were never part of this family. I read each message. Didn't delete them. Didn't reply. I just saved them. As a record for myself of where I once poured out everything. And what I got in return. On the 16th day, Minneapolis was hit by the first snowstorm of the season. News alerts advised everyone to stay indoors. Some areas temporarily lost power. I sat by the window, wrapped in a thick blanket, hands curled around a mug of hot cocoa, the heater humming steadily beside me. Outside, the wind howled through every corner of the city. Part of me wondered, were they huddled together in the living room, wrapped in every blanket they owned? Were they thinking of me? Not as a money transfer, but as a person? The one who had quietly kept that house warm for the past 2 winters? Maybe not. But I wasn't waiting for that anymore. I set my phone aside, pulled the armchair closer to the heater, and opened the first page of my new novel. My eyes paused at the opening line. You can't warm a place where they always saw you as the cold wind. And I smiled. Since the heating was cut, the messages from my family increased with each drop on the thermometer. I didn't need to check my phone to guess their contents. They all carried the same tone: urgency, blame, sometimes desperation. On November 17th, the first text came from Mom. Emily, it's 54 DEF in the house. Your dad keeps coughing and refuses to take medicine. Can you help call someone? I read the message, then placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter. On the stove, a pot of potato and celery soup bubbled, its rich aroma filling the small kitchen. I stirred steadily, the heat fogging up the window panes. That afternoon, the outside temperature dropped to 25 DGF. The snowstorm arrived earlier than expected, wind gusting against the rooftops, but inside my little apartment, everything was warm and quiet. I wrapped myself in my favorite sweater, turned on the oven for extra warmth, and poured a cup of cinnamon tea. Somewhere else, I knew they were pulling out every thin blanket in the house, layering clothes, and turning up a thermostat no longer connected to anything. On November 19th, Dad called 12 times. I didn't pick up a single one. A message followed, short and commanding. Call me back. This isn't a joke. I gave a dry laugh. To them, I was still the obedient daughter, the one behind the scenes, the one who handled things. They forgot that even kindness has its limits. That same day, Mandy posted a story on social media, a picture of her feet in thick socks with the caption, "Cold enough to feel like we live in a freezer." I just scrolled past. I didn't feel pity. I didn't find it funny. I just thought it was accurate. They were living in a freezer they had shut themselves into the moment they called and told me to stay back for Mandy's peace. On November 21st, Mom called again, voice choked. Emily, It's down to 40 Jeff in the house. Your dad's sleeping in a winter coat. My hands are so numb I can't even do the dishes. Can you do something? I was prepping grilled cheese for dinner. The oven glowed orange and the scent of golden, sizzling butter filled the room. I didn't answer. That evening, I ate in silence, the occasional buzz of messages breaking through the crunch of each bite. Each time my phone vibrated, I glanced briefly, a habit I'd formed over the past week, then went back to enjoying my meal. I wasn't glad they were suffering, but I wasn't sad either. I was simply living within the boundaries I had drawn after years of being seen as the financial backup, with no need for consent. On November 23rd, 2 days before Thanksgiving, a message from Dad made me pause mid-splice while chopping onions. Emily, if you still consider yourself part of this family, now's the time to prove it. I set the knife down and looked out the window. Outside, snow blanketed the porch and the neighbors' cars. I closed my eyes, picturing the old house, where I learned to ride a bike, where I wrapped my first Christmas gift, now sitting cold and silent. But in that vision, I no longer saw myself in the frame. I poured more hot water into the teapot. As the steam rose, I thought about Mandy, who once told me I was useless for refusing to fund her local fashion magazine idea last year. About Dad, who said I needed to stop being so sensitive when I brought up always being excluded from family meetings. About Mom, who stayed silent every time I was dismissed just to keep the peace. I had been silent long enough. That night, I curled up on the sofa, a book in hand, covered with the light fleece blanket I bought last year. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, but it was enough. Warm and peaceful. My phone kept ringing. I still didn't answer. Because sometimes, the only way for others to recognize your worth is to disappear from the place they always assumed you'd be. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke before sunrise, the pale light slipping through thin white curtains. Outside, snow had blanketed the steps, and the city was eerily quiet. No cars, no voices, just the wind whispering over rooftops. A gentle reminder that winter had claimed every corner. I turned on the coffee maker and made myself a simple breakfast: crispy toast, peanut butter, and a juicy orange. I didn't prepare turkey. I didn't make the mashed potatoes Mom used to cook. I didn't want anything that reminded me of the old kitchen where the three of us used to squeeze in on holidays. This year, I chose simplicity. Not from lack, but because I no longer needed to pretend things were the same. At 10 a.m., I was on the sofa, blanket draped over me, holding a hot cup of coffee, feet stretched to the edge of the table. A documentary I loved was playing on the TV. Everything felt so peaceful, I almost forgot the emotional storm of the past few weeks. Then, the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I knew who it was before I even stepped into the hallway. I peeked through the peephole and wasn't surprised to see the familiar figure. A thick gray coat, cheeks flushed from cold and frustration, eyes still holding that look I'd known since childhood. Not apology, but expectation. I cracked the door slightly, warm air spilling out, hitting my father's gaunt face. "Emily," he said, his breath forming pale clouds. "We need to talk." I leaned against the door frame, hand still on the knob. "I don't think today's the right day to talk." "You cut the heat," he said flatly. "The house is freezing. Your mom's sick. She's locked herself upstairs. It's 38 degrees in there." I kept my gaze steady on his. "I didn't cut anything. I just stopped paying. Those are two different things." He frowned. "You know we're not good with tech. The contract was under your name. When you canceled, the company didn't notify us." "Because it was never in your name to begin with," I said. "I handled everything. For 2 years, over $8,000, and then, with one call, I was cut out of dinner to avoid upsetting Mandy. So now, maybe you should handle the rest." He flinched like he hadn't expected me to remember every number. But I remembered. Every bill, every skipped meal so I could send money. Every morning I waited at the bus stop in the snow just to make my shift on time. "Emily, don't make this more complicated than it is," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "This is all just a misunderstanding. It's just been a tough year. Mandy's been through a lot." I sighed. "Dad, Mandy's been through a lot because she puts herself there. I'm the one who gets pushed out." I stayed quiet when she blew all her savings on a creative academy she dropped after 2 months. I stayed quiet when she borrowed money and disappeared. But when I got excluded from a family meal because of her fragility, that was it. No more. He stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then he shook his head slightly, voice lower now. "We have no money, Emily. We've sold nearly everything valuable. I called the heating company, but we can't afford the upfront cost. Your mom has a fever. We can't take it much longer." I could feel the cold seeping through the cracked door, but I didn't move. "You told me I should stay back, to keep the peace for Mandy." I did exactly that. I stayed back. As for peace, I don't know about you, but I've found mine. He gripped the edge of his hood, eyes narrowing. "You're punishing the whole family over one sentence said in frustration?" I opened the door a little wider, letting him see the warm apartment behind me. The kitchen glowing, the neatly set table, the quiet hum of the heater in the corner. "It's not punishment," I said softly. "It's just letting you feel the cost of pushing someone aside when you no longer need them." He stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked away, his footsteps crunching through the snow. I closed the door, the sound of the lock clicking into place, clean and firm. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, I poured myself another cup of coffee. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trembling anymore. The week after Thanksgiving, I got a call from Haley, my cousin who lives in southern Minnesota, one of the few relatives who still kept in touch with me despite not being close to Mandy. Her voice came through the speaker, loud and clear, mixed with the sound of wind howling against her window. "I just talked to Aunt Claire," Haley began, straight to the point. "Things at your house are worse than I thought." I sat down at the dining table, holding a steaming cup of ginger tea, my eyes following the fog rising on the window pane. "Mandy's moved out," Haley continued. "Her new boyfriend just broke up with her. She crashed at her best friend's place, but they only let her stay for a few days. Now she's sleeping on someone's couch in Eden Prairie." I wasn't surprised. Mandy always had a way of making everything orbit around her, until no one was left to spin. The affection she'd relied on all her life had finally scattered with the cold wind. "What about my parents?" I asked, my voice calm. "Aunt's staying in a roadside motel near Highway 52. Real cheap, the kind people rent by the week with walls thin as paper. I heard she's got a mild case of pneumonia. And your dad—" Haley hesitated, then sighed. "He sold Grandpa's old watch collection to pay for some temporary heating oil. But it'll only last a few days." I gently tightened my grip around the teacup. That watch collection was the only thing my grandfather had left behind, once displayed like a treasure in the glass cabinet in the living room. Now, it was being listed online, like items no one even cared to bargain for. "You okay, Emily?" Haley asked softly, sensing my long silence. "I'm okay," I replied. "Just a little sad about how it all ended." "I'm not," Haley said, her voice firmer. "I think you did the right thing. If people only come to you when they need something, that's not family. That's using you." We chatted a little more before hanging up. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen now dark, reflecting my face in the kitchen light. Not happy, not angry. Just the cold clarity of someone who had finally stopped. Not because they were tired, but because they had gone far enough to realize they owed no one anything anymore. In the days that followed, I slipped back into my regular rhythm. Early mornings with coffee, work shifts at the distribution center from 7 to 3, afternoon stops at the local market for fresh produce and new pastries. Evenings spent reading, listening to old jazz records, and occasionally calling Haley to hear stories from outside the family circle. Other than that, I heard nothing from Mandy, Dad, or Mom. The messages had stopped after Dad came to my door. The The old house on Ashwood Street was now listed for sale on a local real estate site. Haley said they couldn't afford to keep it, not even with winter just beginning. Sometimes I dreamed of walking back into that old kitchen, the one where Mom used to bake pumpkin pies, where I did my homework in high school, where Dad laid out the morning paper on the table every day. But in the dream, the kitchen was cold, dim, and no one was there. I just stood quietly, looked around, and gently closed the door behind me. I wasn't angry with them. Truly, I wasn't. But I didn't feel sorry anymore either. Maybe because, in the end, I had been cold and alone too. Except I had learned to stand up and build a fire for myself. One night in early December, Haley called again. Her voice rang out between laughter and exasperation. "Emily, you won't believe this. Mandy's on the internet telling some sob story about being abandoned by family like you're the cruelest person alive." I raised an eyebrow. "She did what?" "Posted a video, crying, saying you left your family during a crisis, but not a single word about all the money you paid or how they cut you out of Thanksgiving." I chuckled, a small smile, without bitterness. "Let her talk," I said. "People will believe what they want. I don't have to prove anything anymore." Haley laughed loudly. "I love this version of you. Solid, unshakable. You're honestly inspiring." After the call, I made myself a cup of hot cocoa, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall slowly under the warm glow of the street lamp. The world outside was still cold, still harsh. But I had learned how to keep myself warm. From simple things, from clear boundaries, and from knowing that sometimes, to live in peace, you have to walk away and never look back. That afternoon, the snow was thick and fluffy, covering the small balcony where I kept a dried lavender pot. The city was silent in the -4-degree cold. No one went outside unless absolutely necessary. I was folding a freshly washed wool scarf when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was a delivery, but then came a knock, steady, hesitant. That made me pause. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. "Mom." She stood there, bundled in a puffy coat that nearly swallowed her face, a wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, snow piled on her shoulders and hat. She clutched an old handbag, her shoes buried deep in the snow, looking both weathered and unfamiliar. I hesitated for a few seconds before cracking the door open, leaving a narrow gap between us. "Emily?" my mother said softly, her voice trembling, whether from the cold or something else I couldn't tell. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced, but I didn't know how much longer I could wait." I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my distance. "Why are you here, in this weather?" "I took the bus," she said, inhaling before coughing lightly. "Then walked the rest of the way. Took nearly an hour, but I thought maybe you'd hear me out this time." I didn't say anything, just waited in silence. "I've been thinking a lot. About Thanksgiving. About all the winters before." She tightened her grip on the bag, her eyes on the tiled doorstep where the snow had started to melt into water. "And I realized I was wrong. Not just for what I said that day, but for all the years I let you carry everything and treated it like it was expected." I tilted my head slightly. For the first time in years, I saw my mother without the mask of strength. No justifications, no polished reasoning. Just a woman trying to find her way back from the path she'd chosen. "Mandy regrets it too," she went on. "She says things never should have gotten this far. She says, you don't owe anyone anything." I let out a dry laugh. "Too late, Mom. Everyone says I don't owe anyone. Only after I stopped paying, only after everything fell apart, do I suddenly become someone worth appreciating. That's not it," she shook her head, her voice catching. "I just want you to know. I understand now. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't stand by you sooner." I looked at her for a long moment. Those apologies, had they come years ago, might have softened me. But now, the wounds no longer bled, they had become scars. And scars don't feel You chose Mandy, I said slowly, every word as sharp and cold as the wind. When I needed a seat at the table, you told me to stay back because Mandy was stressed. When the house was in trouble, I paid the bills, but Mandy was the one being comforted. When I started living for myself, you called it punishment. So what now? You're here to ask me to carry it all again? She looked up, eyes full of tears. No, I'm not asking you to come back for anything. I just want you to know you matter. And even if you never forgive me, I accept that. I didn't respond right away. I opened the door a little wider, not to invite her in, but to let her feel the warmth behind me. From the apartment I'd kept lit, heated, and peaceful on my own. A stark contrast to where she had come from. I'm not angry anymore, I said honestly, but I'm not the same person either. I'm not the last bolt holding the family together. I've stopped doing that, and I'm not going back. She tightened her grip on her bag, then nodded. I understand. I didn't close the door right away. We stood there a few seconds more, saying nothing, letting the wind blow between the silence. Then she stepped back and turned away. I watched her walk off, her figure shrinking in the snow. When I closed the door, I didn't feel the lightness I thought I would, but there was no regret either, just a warm certainty like the glow of the lamp in my apartment that I had made the right choice. I returned to the sofa, pulled the blanket over myself, and resumed the old jazz track I'd paused. And as the saxophone played, I knew, for the first time in years, I no longer needed permission to live my own life. January passed in a soft, white hush of snowfall. The city lay frozen in bitter cold, and I continued living at the quiet pace I'd chosen. My apartment stayed warm, thanks to the small heater by the window, and the moments I spent reheating soup, toasting bread, or knitting scarves on lazy weekends. There were no more messages from Mom. The last time she came was right after Thanksgiving, and since then, I hadn't heard a word. No blame, no begging, not even the usual New Year greetings she used to send, those generic ones with a picture. I didn't feel sad about it. In fact, I felt relieved. That silence wasn't scary. It was like fresh air after a storm that had lasted for years. Haley still gave me updates each week, as if she were the only remaining bridge between me and the rest of the family. I saw Mandy post asking for help on a community forum. Haley said during our most recent call. She said she lost her job, looking for temporary housing, included something about cracks in family relationships. Same old deflecting. I didn't say anything. I just switched my phone to speaker and kept chopping onions in the kitchen. The aroma of sautéed onions filled the room, overpowering the story being told. Uncle Mark is trying to sell his car, Haley added. That old SUV's still running fine. I heard he wants the money to pay off some overdue bills. Aunt Claire moved in with a relative in Des Moines. She said she needs time to rethink how she raised her kids. Haley chuckled bitterly on the other end. A little late. Yeah, I replied calmly. But maybe better than never realizing it all. As time passed, things I once struggled to see became clearer. Not everyone changes, and not everyone is worth hoping they will. Some things, once broken, are better left where they fell. Like cracks on winter ice, best not stepped on, not patched. I no longer thought about Mandy every night, no longer checked social media to see who was saying what. And I certainly no longer felt the need to explain to the world what I did right or wrong. I just lived, truly. Every morning I woke up in this cozy apartment reminded me that I was standing on ground I chose for myself, not on a shaky foundation built from someone else's expectations. At the end of January, I stopped by the used bookstore down the block. The shop owner recognized me instantly. Haven't seen you in a while, he said cheerfully. Braving the cold, huh? I smiled and picked out a novel about women who left their families to start over. When I got home, I placed the book on the table, boiled water for tea, and sat by the fireplace. The fire glowed bright, orange light flickering against the exposed brick wall. I pulled the wool blanket higher and stared into the flames. Steady, quiet, persistent. just like me. Somewhere out there, the old house was probably still cold. Maybe they were borrowing space heaters from neighbors. Maybe Mandy was filling out aid applications. Maybe my mother still curled up every night in 3 blankets, thinking about those dinners when we were all together, and the people who no longer wanted to sit at that table. As for me, I no longer belonged to that back then. The fire crackled in agreement. I reached for my tea, steam blurring my vision, though my heart had never been clearer. Winter would last, snow would fall, but this time, I wouldn't be the one shivering. I had chosen peace, and I didn't regret it. From my story, I've learned that not all blood ties are worth preserving at all costs. Some boundaries, once crossed too many times, must be redrawn with finality. I once believed sacrifice meant love, but in truth, unconditional sacrifice only teaches others to devalue your worth. Now I no longer seek validation from my family. I live for myself, and that is the freest thing I've ever done. What do you think about Emily's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it what she needed to protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional family stories to come. My name is Leah, I'm 31 years old, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. After nearly 7 years together, my boyfriend Adam, who's 32, got down on one knee and proposed on a warm spring afternoon, right in our tiny kitchen. He didn't say much, just simply, "I want dinners with you for the rest of my life." And without hesitation, I said yes. Adam isn't flashy. He's genuine, kind, and always knows how to make me feel safe, no matter how chaotic the world gets. We've been through it all, moving, job losses, losing loved ones. But I never imagined the biggest challenge would come from my own family. It might sound unbelievable, but from the moment I announced our engagement, my mother and my half-sister, Brooklyn, turned what should have been the happiest time of my life into a bitter spectacle. Brooklyn is 26 now, 5 years younger than me, but I've known since we were kids that there was never such a thing as sisterhood between us. My mom remarried when I was 6. Brooklyn is her daughter with her new husband, a man praised by his family for being polished and well-dressed, but as emotionally distant as stone. We lived in the same house for almost 20 years, but between me and Brooklyn, there was always an invisible wall, built from my mom's blatant favoritism and Brooklyn's constant jealousy. Since elementary school, Brooklyn couldn't stand it when I was praised for being smart or well-behaved. She once ripped up my test paper because the teacher put a gold star on it. As we got older, the jealousy only got more subtle, but never went away. I got a scholarship to a state university. Brooklyn dropped out of a junior college program to become a part-time influencer, always complaining about being broke while never letting go of her phone. I never thought getting engaged would be the last straw for Brooklyn, but it was. Just hours after I posted a picture of the ring on Instagram, my mother called. Not to congratulate me, not to ask about the date. Her voice was serious, like I'd done something terribly wrong. "Brooklyn's going to be really upset. She just broke up with Cody last week. You shouldn't be flaunting this." I stood frozen in the kitchen. Flaunting? I was just sharing a happy moment after 7 years of waiting. But I said nothing. I didn't push back. I was used to making room for Brooklyn, whether that meant attention, emotion, or now, even my future. A few weeks later, Brooklyn posted a vague status about maybe getting engaged. Her new boyfriend, a guy named Zane who none of us had met, had moved in with her after less than a month. I didn't comment. I knew better. But 4 months later, they got married. And it fell apart just 8 weeks in. I didn't feel glad when I heard Zane had cheated on her with her best friend. I genuinely felt bad. Even though Brooklyn never saw me as her sister, I'd once hoped that maybe, someday, we could figure out how to coexist. But what I didn't expect was that after her rushed divorce, Brooklyn and my mother quietly started blaming me. And worse, they weren't going to stop at blame. I thought maybe things would calm down after Brooklyn's divorce. I kept moving forward with wedding planning, choosing flowers, trying on dresses, finalizing the menu. Our wedding date was set for early March, just 3 months away. But I was wrong. One Wednesday evening, while I was at Adam's house, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was strangely soft, almost fake. "Are you free, honey? I need to talk to you for a minute." I stepped out to the balcony. It was cold, but I needed the space. After a few pleasantries, she got straight to the point. "Leah, I've been thinking a lot, and I feel like you should reconsider the wedding in March." I narrowed my eyes. "Reconsider what exactly?" "Brooklyn is still hurting. She hasn't been able to sleep through the night since the court hearing. If you go through with a big event like this, I'm afraid it'll break her even more." I clenched my phone. "You're saying I should cancel my wedding?" She sighed, drawn out like she was stating something everyone should already agree with. "Not cancel entirely, but maybe keep it simple, more private. A small ceremony in a church with just close family. No need for a fancy venue, live music, or imported wine." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd spent almost a year planning this day. Dozens of emails, hundreds of tiny decisions. And now my mother? The same woman who once said, "I'll support whatever you choose," was asking me to downsize the most important day of my life because of Brooklyn? I spoke slowly, carefully, as if holding back a tide. "Mom, we've already paid deposits. For the flowers, the cake, the venue, the band. None of it is refundable. I can't just reduce it to a small church event now." My mom didn't flinch. Her tone sharpened, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Money can be replaced, Leah. But family love? You can't buy that back. Do you know Brooklyn cries every time she sees a wedding dress or a save the day? As her sister, you should understand and avoid pouring salt on her wounds." I was speechless. For the first time in my life, it hit me. My mother didn't see my wedding as a celebration. She saw it as a threat to Brooklyn's emotional stability, and if she had to choose, she would choose Brooklyn. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "So what do you want me to do? Apologize because I'm in love and loved back? Wait for Brooklyn to feel better before I'm allowed to be happy?" My mother went silent for a beat, then responded coolly. "If you truly love this family, you'll know what you need to do." The call ended, leaving a tight knot in my chest. Adam stepped out to the balcony, saw my pale face, and gently asked what happened. I replied quietly, "My mom wants me to postpone the wedding." He didn't ask for more. He just squeezed my hand and said, "This is our wedding. No one else gets to turn it into something it's not." I nodded. But deep down I knew this was just the beginning. And my mom? She wasn't the kind to stop after just one call. I thought my mom would go quiet after that phone call. But just 2 days later, Brooklyn started texting me. Non-stop, relentless, and manipulative, like a string of emotional bait. "Hope you're enjoying your wedding plans. Some of us are just trying to crawl out of the wreckage." A few hours later, some wounds don't heal just because someone pretends to be happy in front of them. I stayed silent, but the more silent I stayed, the more she escalated. The next message wasn't subtle anymore. "You've always been the one everyone loves, praises. And me? People only remember me when I fall apart. You must enjoy that." I handed the phone to Adam. He looked at me, jaw tight. "She's trying to make you the villain in her own life story." I knew that, but what I didn't expect was Brooklyn didn't stop at just texting. One Monday afternoon, right after Adam got home from work, he received a call from an unknown number. He didn't answer. The caller rang 3 times. Finally, he picked up and stood frozen in the kitchen for almost 3 minutes. When he hung up, his face was stone cold. "It was your mom." I turned sharply. "She called you. What for?" Adam sighed. "She said she wanted to talk about Brooklyn. She told me you were being stubborn and that if I were a thoughtful man, I'd convince you to have a simpler, private wedding. She added, real men don't need to show off." I stood still, the feeling of having my own mother call my fiancé behind my back as if I were some disobedient teenager set my chest on fire. I'm not 18 anymore, being forced to cancel summer classes to babysit Brooklyn. I've grown up, and she doesn't get to control this. Adam placed a hand gently on my shoulder. We're not changing anything, but I think you should brace yourself for whatever's next. 3 days later, my cousin Kaylee called. You need to hear this. Brooklyn's been telling people that you purposely chose March to hurt her. I froze. What? The wedding date was set last year. I know, but she's saying you timed it exactly 4 months after her divorce to throw a lavish party, that you're fully aware how emotionally fragile people are after a breakup, and still chose to rub it in? I sank into the couch. She actually believes that? Think. She needs someone to blame. And you're a convenient target. I knew Kaylee wasn't making this up. And I also knew Brooklyn well enough to believe she'd craft a distorted story and convince herself it was real. Worse yet, some people started buying it. My aunt, my mom's younger sister, called and gently asked if I could postpone the wedding to fall so things could settle. A college friend messaged saying, even a small celebration doesn't take away the meaning of love, and an old coworker of my mom's left a comment under my wedding dress fitting photo. Hope everyone heals before someone else throws salt on the wound. No one asked if I was okay, being quietly ostracized by my own mother and sister. No one asked if it hurt to have my wedding labeled cruel. I had become the symbol of everything Brooklyn didn't have, and my mother, as always, chose to stand with her. That night, I sat in the living room, wedding invitations scattered across the coffee table. Adam walked over, picked one up, and looked at me. I know this is hard, but maybe it's time you drew a line. That Christmas, I had hoped for peace, just for one night. The family dinner was at my Aunt Carol's house, just outside Augusta, where we all usually gathered for the holidays. Adam and I arrived early, carrying wine and homemade gingerbread cookies. I knew my mom and Brooklyn would be there, but I hoped, foolishly, that the holiday spirit would calm them. I was wrong. The moment we stepped in, Brooklyn wouldn't even look at me. My mom gave Adam a half-hearted hug and quickly turned to chat with some great aunt. I took a deep breath. It's fine, just stay respectful, I reminded myself. Things were going smoothly until I was in the kitchen chatting with some cousins about cake flavors. I had just mentioned lemon mousse when Brooklyn suddenly stood up, shoved her chair back, and said in a trembling voice, loud enough for the whole room, You know what, Leah? Some of us are struggling to breathe every day while you ramble on about your wedding like it's your personal movie premiere. The room froze. I turned slowly, keeping my tone calm. I didn't mean anything by it, I was just answering their question. Brooklyn stepped right into the center of the living room, eyes brimming with tears. But I could tell right away, this wasn't grief, it was performance. You've taken everything from me. The attention, the love, and now even the ability to feel safe in a room full of people. Every word you say cuts deeper, Leah. But you don't care, do you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom rushed over to wrap Brooklyn in her arms, rubbing her back like a child who just got scolded. Then she turned to me with a look of disappointment. Do you really need to flaunt everything? I told you, Brooklyn isn't okay. Why can't you tone things down a little? I stood there in silence. Then slowly, I placed my wine glass on the table. I've been quiet long enough. I turned to face Brooklyn, looked her straight in the eyes. You're hurting? Then hurt with dignity. Don't drag an entire room into your meltdown. You chose the wrong man. You chose to get married after 3 months. You chose to post wedding photos every day like a personal PR campaign. And now, you choose to blame me for all of it? Brooklyn turned pale. But I wasn't done. And Mom, I turned to my mother, my voice starting to shake with anger. This isn't empathy anymore. This is enabling. It's blind favoritism. It's staying silent when one person attacks another. And now, joining in. A heavy silence swept across the room. No one said a word, no nervous laughter. Even the Christmas music had stopped. I took a deep breath and said clearly, firmly, "You and Brooklyn are no longer invited to my wedding." My mother shot up from her seat. "What did you just say?" "I've had enough. I don't want people at the most important day of my life who are secretly hoping it falls apart. I'm not getting married to prove anything to Brooklyn. I'm marrying Adam because I love him, and I don't need your permission to be happy." Adam stood beside me, quietly took my hand, and we walked out, into the cold night that with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. That evening, I wrote a short email. I sent it to my mom and Brooklyn. The subject line was simple: wedding update. Body of the email: based on everything that has happened and how the two of you have behaved throughout this process, I regret to inform you that you will not be on the guest list for my wedding. This is not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This is a necessary boundary to protect myself and the life I'm building. I hit send, no tears, no hesitation. This time, it was me I chose. Less than 12 hours after I sent the email, I received my first response. A long, drawn-out email from my mom. Subject line: "You're tearing this family apart." She wrote, "Leah, I truly can't believe how cold you've become. I raised you with nothing but love, and now, over a simple misunderstanding, you've cast me out of the most important day of your life? Brooklyn has been through a major shock. If you can't show compassion, the least you could offer is kindness. Do you even care that she cried all night? Or is that no longer important to you? Seems like you've chosen romance over blood." Reading each line felt like being pricked by 1,000 tiny needles. Not one word acknowledged what I'd endured. Not one sentence admitted how Brooklyn had slandered me. It was all about my sister's feelings. And somehow, I was still to blame. Before I could even exhale, a second email came in. This one, from Brooklyn. Just 3 furious lines. "You're petty. You used your wedding to exclude me, to humiliate me one final time. I hope you enjoy your victory. But don't forget, family never forgets betrayal." I let out a small laugh, not from amusement but sheer disbelief. They called me the betrayer when I'd been cornered for months. The next 3 days were a flood of calls, texts, and vague social media posts from people who had previously claimed to be neutral. My Uncle John called, voice harsh. "Couldn't you have handled this more gently? This is family. You've made your mother cry." A cousin I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years messaged. "I heard Leah didn't invite her own mom to her wedding. That's just wrong. No matter what she's done, she's still your mother." I let the silence speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I'd already said more than enough. Clearly, they were only hearing what they wanted to hear. From Brooklyn and my mom. Luckily, not everyone turned their back on me. That afternoon, while I was reorganizing the wedding invitation table and wondering if I'd gone too far, my phone rang. It was Aunt Valerie, my dad's younger sister. I wasn't sure if she'd heard what happened, but the moment I picked up, she spoke first. "You finally did the right thing. I know how much you've endured. Leah, the whole family sees it. But most stay quiet to avoid conflict. You stood up." I couldn't hold back the tears. That same evening, Megan, my closest cousin since high school, also called. Her voice was calm but firm. "Leah, you did the right thing. I've watched Brooklyn play the victim for years. Maybe now people will finally start seeing the truth." And like a quiet ripple, support began to surface from the most unexpected places. An old friend of my dad's messaged, "I'd be proud to see you standing up for your happiness like this." A distant aunt from another state sent a handwritten note with a wedding card. "Real family is made up of those who respect you." Even though the cruel words from my mom and Brooklyn kept coming, I stayed silent. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. That night, Adam and I sat together, hand in hand, looking over the new guest list. Smaller, warmer. And finally, it felt like this wedding was truly mine. I had assumed that after being removed from the guest list, Brooklyn would at least keep her distance. But once again, I gave her too much credit. About a week after the dramatic Christmas dinner, Adam and I were in the living room reviewing our wedding vendor checklist. I had just stepped out to make tea when his phone rang. When I came back, he was holding the phone, face tense. "Who is it?" I asked, setting down my cup. Adam handed me the phone. The screen showed a string of texts. From Brooklyn. "I know I probably shouldn't bother you, but I really need someone to talk to. I don't understand why Leia's being so cold. I feel like the whole family has turned against me. You're the only one I feel like I can talk to without judgment." A chill ran down my spine. Adam tilted his head toward me. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer, I just held out my hand. "Let me see all the messages." He opened the full thread. Brooklyn hadn't just sent one message out of weakness. She had been texting him every day. Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes nearly at midnight, always filled with emotional manipulation and subtle undertones. One message even read, "Have you ever wondered if things had gone differently, maybe you and I could have been something?" It felt like someone had slapped me across the face. Adam's tone hardened. I never responded. I knew something was off from the very first message. "But I thought you should see this." I took a deep breath, my chest burning. Not from jealousy, but from sheer disrespect. Brooklyn wasn't just trying to tarnish my reputation anymore. She was now trying to hijack my relationship, my life, out of envy. "Take screenshots of everything for me," I said, my voice calm in a way that almost scared me. Adam nodded. Within minutes, the entire conversation was saved to my phone. I didn't text Brooklyn. I didn't call my mom. I was far too familiar with their strike first, play innocent later routine. Instead, I sent a short email to the close relatives who had seen everything from the beginning, and still chose to stand by the truth. Subject: I need to clarify something. Body: I've tried to remain silent to avoid further conflict, but this has gone too far. Attached are screenshots from Adam's phone, messages Brooklyn has sent him recently. I'm not sharing this for drama. I'm sharing this so everyone understands why I've had to draw a line. This is no longer about hurt feelings. This is about intentional manipulation, division, and the complete disregard for someone else's dignity. Please read and reflect. I'm not asking for anyone to take sides, I just don't want to be misrepresented anymore. I wasn't expecting much beyond silence, but to my surprise, the response was stronger than I imagined. Megan called me less than 30 minutes after I sent the email. "Leah, this is insane. What was she thinking, sending those kinds of texts to your fiancé?" Aunt Valerie sent me a simple email. Just one sentence. "You've handled this with more grace than anyone else would have. I fully support you." Another relative who had stayed silent the entire time finally texted me. "I never thought Brooklyn was this bad. It's all clear now." As for my mom, take a guess. A missed call just before midnight, then a short text. "You've gone too far shaming your own sister like that. No matter what she did, you shouldn't expose her to the whole family." I read it, deleted it, and left it at that. Because I knew, in my mother's eyes, Brooklyn could stab me in the back, and if I screamed, I'd still be the one who overreacted. Our wedding day fell on an early March afternoon. The sun was gentle, the breeze crisp, just enough to tint my cheeks pink without needing blush. The garden behind the resort in the North Georgia hills was draped in lavender, and strings of lights strung across the old oak trees. Everything was exactly as we planned. Exactly as I had imagined throughout our 8 years together. I had just finished my makeup when Amanda, my maid of honor and best friend, stepped into the room with a worried look on her face. "Leah, we've got a problem." "Don't tell me the cake collapsed," I said, half joking, half dreading. Amanda swallowed hard, then said, "Worse. Brooklyn and your mom. They're at the gate. I froze. What are they doing here? They're arguing with security. Your mom is crying, and Brooklyn, she's yelling that she's being thrown out of the family, a few guests overheard. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then opened them, my voice frighteningly calm. Get the venue manager. Tell them to keep them at the gate. If needed, call a car service and have them taken away. Amanda nodded and rushed out. I stood still, my hand gripping the edge of my wedding dress. Not long after, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I wasn't going to answer, but then I did. On the other end, my mom's voice trembled with anger. Are you really going to hold your wedding and toss your mother and sister out like garbage? I took a deep breath. You chose Brooklyn's side, even when she harassed my fiancé. You don't have the right to ask me that. You'll regret this, Leah. Marriage isn't just dresses and flowers. One day you'll need your mother. But I may not be there anymore. I ended the call without a word, then placed the phone on the table like I was closing the final door inside myself. The ceremony began at 4 p.m. Adam waited under the floral arch, his eyes both nervous and warm. Our closest guests sat nearby, their smiles clear and genuine. People who stood by us not out of duty, but love. As the music played and I walked down the aisle, the soft golden sunlight felt like a quiet blessing. There was no noise, no sign of Brooklyn or my mother. I later learned Amanda had handled it firmly. When they begged to be let in because we're family, security refused. And when they wouldn't stop causing a scene, the venue arranged for a private car to escort them off the property. No shouting, no door slamming, but everyone who saw knew exactly who had crossed the line. The ceremony went perfectly, every detail intact. Adam's vows nearly made me choke up. Leah, you're not just my love. You're the one who taught me that peace isn't something we find. It's something we choose. And today, I choose to be by your side. Always. Everyone stood and applauded, and it felt like all the heaviness of the past few months dissolved into the music. After the ceremony, as I chatted with guests, Aunt Valerie came up and held my hand. You've done what no one in this family had the courage to do in 20 years. You broke the cycle of silence and endurance. I smiled, throat tight, knowing I didn't have to explain myself. The people who mattered understood. That night, under the glow of string lights, Adam leaned in and whispered, I know how strong you had to be today. But from now on, you don't have to do it alone. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling a strange lightness. My mom may never accept me. Brooklyn may stay stuck in her loop of jealousy and blame. But I had stepped out of it. And I knew I was never going back. Adam and I returned home after a short honeymoon in Asheville. The storm had passed. I no longer checked my phone constantly. I stopped waiting for an apology from my mom or a gesture from Brooklyn. I knew. They'd never do it, and I didn't need them to. Less than a week later, I got a call from my cousin Megan. Brooklyn and Aunt Annie just had a massive fight, and this time she lost it. What happened? Brooklyn moved back in after crashing the wedding failed, and ever since, she's been sulking at home, doing nothing but stalking your Facebook and posting cryptic status updates. I hadn't followed Brooklyn on social media since the wedding. I blocked all her accounts. But hearing Megan, I could picture every bitter post. So what triggered the fight? I asked. Megan lowered her voice. Brooklyn started blaming Aunt Annie. She said if her mom had stood her ground and kept her on the guest list, things would have turned out differently. Then she accused her of being a failure who didn't protect the daughter who needed her most. I closed my eyes. I could hear Brooklyn's voice in those words. Always the victim of her own story. Always betrayed, forgotten, wounded. Never once reflecting inward. Megan exhaled. Aunt Annie exploded. She yelled, I sacrificed everything for you? covered for you countless times, and now you blame me? Then what happened? She kicked her out that night, called an Uber, told her, "Live however you want, just don't come back." I sat in silence for a few seconds. Brooklyn did what she always does: blame. But this time, my mom had no one else to shift the blame to. With me out of the way, she had to face the truth. The daughter she spoiled turned on her. "Where's Brooklyn now?" I asked. "Heard she's crashing at a friend's place, but who knows, you know Brooklyn. She'll build another story and find someone else to rescue her." I nodded, said nothing more. That night, I opened my phone, deleted every old message thread with my mom and Brooklyn. Then I went into my settings and blocked every last bit of contact: email, phone numbers, even the burner accounts they'd used to secretly view my stories. Adam walked out from the kitchen, wrapped his arms around me from behind. He didn't ask anything. He just rested his chin on my shoulder. I leaned into him and whispered, "I'm okay now. We didn't have a fancy dinner. No candles. Just 2 bowls of warm mushroom soup and a jazz playlist humming from the corner speaker. In a dark room, and I thought, maybe this is what's worth keeping. Not the applause, not the validation from distant relatives, but peace in my heart, and the steady hand that never let go. My family had been broken for a long time. Now, they just couldn't pull me under with them anymore. And me, I'd finally chosen the family I belonged to." Leah's story is a powerful reminder that not every blood tie is worth preserving. When sacrifice becomes expected and love is used to manipulate, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential to protect your worth. Leah didn't just choose happiness. She chose peace, truth, and a family built on mutual respect. In real life, the bravest choice isn't enduring. It's knowing when to let go. What do you think about Leah's decision and how her family fell apart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow this channel for more heartfelt, honest, and eye-opening stories about the hidden struggles behind family life.